Today, we're diving into the unexpected and sometimes frustrating challenges people face in the US. Here's a look at the 101 US problems you may have never considered. Let's get started. The first fact: did you know that there are more McDonald's in the US than hospitals? A staggering fact that highlights the country's obsession with convenience over health. This is just one of 101 crazy problems we're diving into today. 2. Did you know US drivers spend an average of 54 hours per year stuck in traffic? In places like LA, that can be as much as 119 hours. That's almost 5 full days spent sitting in your car, staring at bumpers. Is that really worth it just to get to work? 3. Here's something many people don't realize. The United States is one of only a few developed countries without universal health care. A single emergency room visit can set you back by thousands of dollars. Do you think that's fair? 4. Think potholes are just an inconvenience. They cost Americans nearly $3 billion in car repairs every year. That's a huge burden for drivers, and it's just one of many signs that the country's infrastructure. 5. Now, here's an odd one: tipping culture. In most countries, tipping is optional or rare, but in the US, it's practically mandatory, and servers rely on tips to make a living wage. It's a real dilemma for newcomers. 6. Have you ever tried to call customer service in the US? Many companies have wait times of 30 minutes or more, and often you're talking to a robot before you can even speak to a human. 7. Here's a shocking one for parents. Childcare costs in the US can range from $10,000 to $20,000 per year per child. That's almost as much as a year of college tuition. For many families, this is an impossible financial burden. 8. In 2023, the average American household was burdened with about $96,000 in debt. This includes mortgages, student loans, credit cards, and more. And it's a growing problem that affects millions of families. 9. Did you know that many Americans take out loans to cover the cost of their weddings? The average wedding costs around $30,000. That's a huge financial commitment that many can't afford without going into debt. It's a sign of how expensive weddings have become in this country. 10. Here's a weird one. In some US states, it's illegal to collect rainwater. Yep, you read that right. It's seen as stealing water from the environment. Alright, these facts might sound strange, but they highlight some unique realities of life in the US. Let's see if any of these sound familiar. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe. 11. The United States has one of the highest rates of pet obesity. Nearly 60% of cats and dogs are overweight. Blame it on the table scraps and treats. 12. Housing prices in the US are skyrocketing, while wages have remained stagnant. For many Americans, especially younger generations, owning a home has become an unattainable dream, pushing them into renting for life or living with family. 13. High-speed internet isn't everywhere. Believe it or not, 19 million Americans still don't have access to fast internet, making it tough to work or study from home. 14. Ever tried navigating a US airport? The security lines, baggage fees, and delayed flights can be a nightmare. Want to know my secret weapon for stress-free travel? Subscribe and find out. 15th. Portion sizes in American restaurants are huge. One meal could easily feed an entire family, often leading to food waste and unhealthy eating habits. It's a reflection of how overindulgence has become normalized in American culture. 16. More than half of US workers don't take all their vacation days, leading to burnout and decreased productivity. It's a worrying trend in a country where work-life balance seems to be getting harder to achieve every year. 17. Every year, 30 to 40% of food in the US is wasted. That's enough to feed 150 million people. Think about that the next time you're deciding whether to throw out leftovers. 18. A lot of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. In fact, about 63% of people in the US wouldn't be able to handle a $500 emergency. 19. Meanwhile, the average US household spends $2,482 annually on entertainment, like movies and dining out. And yet, 40% still say they're stressed about money. 20. The US has one of the highest rates of gun ownership in the world, with about 120 guns for every 100 residents. It's the only country where firearms outnumber people, raising serious questions about gun violence and safety. 21st. Most public bathrooms in the US have a large gap under the stall door. Why? Seriously, why? No one seems to know why, but it's definitely uncomfortable. 22. Did you know? Some US states still have dry counties where alcohol sales are completely banned or heavily restricted. If you're planning a celebration, it's crucial to check the local laws before buying any booze. 23rd. Halloween is massive here, but it also comes with a lot of waste. Over 600 million pounds of pumpkin are thrown away every year after Halloween. That's a lot of pie that could have been made. 24. There are 48 million uninsured people in the US, and many of them avoid medical care because of the high costs. Pretty unsettling, right? 25. Think you know how to use a mailbox? The US postal system has its quirks, from those tiny red flags to figuring out where to put outgoing mail. It's a whole system. What do you think of these facts so far? Do any of them sound familiar? Drop your thoughts below. 26. Here's a frustrating one. The cost of insulin in the US is roughly 8 to 10 times higher than in other high-income countries. Many diabetics are stuck, choosing between their health and their budget. 27. Ever notice that in the US, taxes aren't included in most price tags? It means you never quite know how much something costs until you get to the checkout. 28. Let's talk about college textbooks. In the US, students often spend hundreds of dollars on textbooks each semester, even for subjects that have barely changed in years. Ever had to fork out $200 for a book you barely opened? 29th. Public restrooms are hard to find. In many cities, they're either scarce or available only to paying customers, which isn't exactly convenient for people on the go. 30. Some regions of the US face a high risk of natural disasters like hurricanes, wildfires, and tornadoes. And surprisingly, some homeowners in these areas still aren't required to have insurance. 31. The US is one of the only countries that doesn't have a federally mandated paid parental leave policy. For many new parents, that means going back to work only weeks after having a child. 32nd. Americans love acronyms. DMV, IRS, PTO. It's like a secret code. 33. Many American schools rely on property taxes for funding. That means schools in wealthier neighborhoods often have more resources, creating an education gap. 34. Speaking of schools, American students start their days early, some as early as 7:30 a.m. Studies show later start times can improve performance, but change is slow. 35. There's a surprising lack of paid sick leave. In fact, 1 in 4 workers in the US doesn't have access to paid sick days, which means they often work even when they're ill. 36. Plastic usage is a huge issue. Despite the recycling push, the US generates around 42 million metric tons of plastic waste annually, more than any other country. 37. A significant portion of the US population lacks retirement savings. Approximately 25% of Americans have no retirement savings at all, meaning financial insecurity in old age. 38. Believe it or not, many people in the US live without easy access to fresh food. These areas, called food deserts, are often low-income neighborhoods without grocery stores. 39th. Want to vote? In some states, voting rights are stripped away from people with felony convictions, even after they've served their time. It's a topic of big debate. 40. Finding a parking spot in a busy US city? Forget about it. It's a competitive sport. Circle the block a few times, you might get lucky. 41. The US has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world. That's right, with 2.3 million people behind bars, America has more prisoners per capita than nearly any other country. 42. Gas prices vary wildly across the US, and they're often highest in cities where public transportation isn't as reliable. 43. In some states, it's illegal to cross the street outside of a crosswalk, known as jaywalking. You could actually get fined for it. 44. While Europe has embraced high-speed rail, the US has few high-speed train options, meaning most travel relies on cars or planes. 45. A staggering number of Americans struggle with medical debt. It's one of the leading causes of bankruptcy in the country. 46. American football is confusing. What's a touchdown? And why do they keep stopping the game? Don't worry, you'll get there. 47th. Want to buy something online? Prepare for a barrage of shipping options, handling fees, and delivery delays. Online shopping can be a gamble. 48. For anyone moving to the US, the credit score system can be confusing. A good credit score is essential for buying a car, renting an apartment, or even landing some jobs. 49. While 70% of Americans believe climate change is real, policies to address it vary widely from state to state, leading to a patchwork of regulations. 50. Air conditioning is almost essential in many parts of the US, but energy costs can make it prohibitively expensive, especially for low-income households. 51. Did you know some Americans are paying off their student loans well into their 40s and 50s? Higher education has turned into a lifetime debt for many. 52. In the US, if you dial 911, the police are often the first responders, even in mental health emergencies, which isn't always ideal for everyone involved. Let's move on to some of the problems you may encounter in your daily life. 53rd. Small talk is an American art form. How's the weather is just the beginning. Embrace the chit-chat. 54. College admissions in the US can be intensely competitive, with students often needing high grades, extracurriculars, and even legacy status for a better shot. 55. The average US worker gets only 2 weeks of vacation a year. For comparison, some European countries offer 6 weeks or more. 56. A lot of Americans rely on credit cards to make ends meet. However, with average interest rates over 16%, debt can quickly spiral out of control. 57. American TV commercials are loud. Seriously, they can blast you out of your seat. Keep the remote handy. 58th. Payday loans are a big business in the US, but with interest rates that can exceed 400%, they often trap people in cycles of debt. 59. The US has seen a rise in income inequality, with the top 1% controlling a significant portion of the nation's wealth, while wages for the average worker stagnate. 60. Oddly enough, many American houses are built with wood, making them more susceptible to fire and storms than brick or stone structures found in other countries. 61. For those who like variety, American coins don't show their values in numbers. Instead, they just say dime or quarter, which confuses a lot of newcomers. 62. The US is one of the only countries that still uses Fahrenheit instead of Celsius. It means converting temperatures can be a little tricky for international travelers. 63. There are stand your ground laws in many states, allowing people to use force, including deadly force, to defend themselves without retreating first. 64. In some states, it's illegal to pump your own gas. Oregon and New Jersey, for example, require attendants to do it for you. 65. Telemarketing is still huge in the US, despite the do not call registry. And yes, robocalls are still a thing, and they're very annoying. 66. Driving in the US? Get ready for four-way stops. Who goes first? It's a game of chicken sometimes. 67. For sports fans, you may already know this. The US is one of the few countries where football means a game that's primarily played with hands, while the rest of the world uses football for what Americans call soccer. 68. Halloween costumes and decorations are a billion-dollar industry in the US, but many costumes end up in landfills after just one use. Scary, right? 69. Did you know American banknotes are all the same size and color? It makes it hard to distinguish bills, unlike other countries where each denomination has a unique color. 70. Ever notice how many ads there are in the US? They're everywhere. On TV, online, even on public transportation. It's hard to escape the constant barrage of marketing. 71. The U.S. has a complex and often confusing system of local, state, and federal laws, which can be difficult to navigate. 72. The U.S. has a lot of lawyers. It's a litigious society. 73. The country has a major homelessness problem. On any given night, about 580,000 Americans are homeless, with rising rent costs making it even harder to find affordable housing. 74. Some states require a permit just to cut down a tree on your own property. It sounds strange, but it's often for environmental protection. 75. In many workplaces, talking about salary is taboo, but openly discussing pay could actually help address wage inequality. 76. Surveillance cameras are everywhere. The average American is captured on surveillance about 238 times a week. Privacy concerns, anyone? 77. The U.S. has a coin shortage problem. During the pandemic, people stopped spending physical money, creating a shortage of coins in circulation. 78. The U.S. has a complex relationship with race and inequality, and systemic racism continues to affect many aspects of American life. 79. Public school calendars are based on old farming schedules, which is why there's such a long summer break, even though most kids don't work on farms anymore. 80th. U.S. measurement units are a mess. Feet, inches, pounds, ounces. It's a whole other language for people from other countries. 81. Property tax varies widely from state to state. In some areas, people pay thousands in taxes on their homes every year, while in others, it's relatively low. 82. There's a huge market for self-storage in the U.S. With so much stuff, Americans rent storage units to hold items they can't fit in their homes. There's over 2.3 billion square feet of storage space. 83. Black Friday can be chaotic. It's not unusual for shoppers to get into physical fights over discounted items. Seems a bit intense, don't you think? 84. In many regions, access to mental health services is limited, even as the need continues to grow. Nearly 1 in 5 adults has experienced mental illness in recent years. 85. You know those no shoes, no shirt, no service signs? They're a real thing. Many businesses reserve the right to refuse service based on dress code. 86. Drinking water quality isn't consistent across the country. Many communities deal with high levels of contaminants, leading to frequent boil water advisories. 87. The U.S. has a growing problem with opioid addiction, affecting communities across the country. 88. Property prices in some cities, like New York and San Francisco, are so high that people pay thousands of dollars for just a few hundred square feet. 89. Political polarization is intense in the U.S., making it difficult to have productive conversations across different viewpoints. 90. Here's a quirky one. Daylight saving time. Twice a year, Americans set their clocks forward or back an hour, but not everyone likes the hassle of adjusting. 91. Ever tried to understand the U.S. tax system? It's notoriously complicated, with different forms, deductions, and credits. It's enough to make your head spin. 92. Oddly enough, there are states where having an open container of alcohol in public is illegal, while in others, it's totally fine. 93. American date formats are confusing. Is it month/day/year or day/month/year? It can lead to some awkward mix-ups. Double-check those dates. 94. In some states, it's illegal to dye a baby chick. Yep, seriously. Big problem. 95. Tipping isn't just for restaurants. Hairdressers, taxi drivers, even baristas expect a tip. Budget accordingly. 96. Voter turnout in the U.S. is often lower than in other developed countries, raising concerns about democratic participation. 97. American appliances are huge. Giant fridges, massive ovens. Do we really need all this space? 98. Crumbling roads, bridges, and public transportation systems need significant investment to ensure safety and efficiency. Delays in addressing these issues lead to increased costs and disruptions in the long run. 99. Trying to eat healthy in the U.S. can be surprisingly expensive. Fresh produce and organic foods often cost a lot more than processed snacks. 100. The US has a massive car culture. In most cities, it's practically essential to own a car as public transportation options are limited or non-existent. 101. And the ultimate US problem? Trying to understand all the other 100 problems. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe for more insights into American life. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.